I want to start by saying I can't stand bullying. Not because I was bullied myself and not because of some PSA I saw. I say it because bullying led directly to one of the scariest moments of my life. When I was in high school, I was pretty average, the kind of kid who just blended in. But that wasn't the case for a guy named Larry. Larry got picked on by everyone. The older kids, who made a point of initiating the younger ones into the tradition of targeting him. He was the quiet loner, thick-framed glasses, braces, the whole look. Basically a walking target. And he was harmless, which somehow made it worse. I started sticking up for him. It damaged my reputation, and I didn't care. I could tell it was making things at least slightly easier for him, in the classes we shared at least. I knew people were probably worse when I wasn't around, but I did what I could. One day I decided to ditch my usual friends at lunch and go sit with Larry. He'd eaten alone every single day for years. For about 15 minutes we just talked. His physics homework, comic books, whatever he wanted. It was the first time anyone had bothered to get to know him, on even a basic level. Then I asked him how people had been treating him lately. Something shifted. "I'm sick of them," he said. "Every last one of them." I tried to keep things light. I asked what if some of them could become his friends. He looked at me and asked if I was his friend. I told him, yeah, of course. "Friends share secrets," he said. "You promise you won't tell anyone?" "Yeah, I won't tell anyone." "All right." Look in my bag. I only saw it for a second before he zipped it back up, but it was unmistakable. Larry had a firearm. I kept my face completely neutral and kept asking questions. With every answer, the cold in my stomach got worse. He said he was planning on using it soon. Not at a range, not against targets. At school, against the students and anyone who tried to get in his way. He said all of this with complete calm, like he'd been thinking about it for a very long time. I got the strong sense this was not the first day he'd brought it. When the bell rang, I told him I'd see him later. Got up and walked away as normally as I could. Our next classes were in the opposite directions. I kept it together until I was around the corner and out of his line of sight. Then I ran as fast as I could to the office. Part of me felt terrible about it, but I had no other choice. I told them everything. Less than a minute later, the lockdown alarm was activated. Everyone was still coming out of lunch when I went off. I watched from the office windows as students started screaming and scrambling for the nearest rooms. The police arrived quickly and searched the building. Larry was nowhere to be found. He'd run home the moment the alarm sounded, which told me everything I needed to know about whether he'd figured out it was me. He was arrested at his house later that day. The district made sure he never returned to that school. That was years ago. Everyone else graduated and moved on. Nobody seems to know what happened to Larry after that. And I'll be honest, I still think about it. The fear that one day he'll come looking for me hasn't fully gone away, but I know what would have happened if I kept his secret. I've seen the headlines. I know how those stories end. This happened at my high school. I played on the boys' volleyball team, and since practice ran after school until early evening, by the time we finished there were hardly any people left in the building, just us and a few janitors. One evening after a hard practice, everyone showered, changed, and headed home. Most of the guys had rides or drove themselves. I was one of the few still waiting on my parents. My mom always took a while, so I stayed behind in the locker room. It was completely empty, except for me. At some point, I heard a loud metallic bang, the kind the exterior door made when it swung hard, the one that led out to the track and football field. I waited, hoping it would stop. It didn't. Eventually, I got up to check. Through the glass panel in the door, I could see a tall man standing outside in a hoodie. He was clearly too old to be a student. He saw me looking and shouted through the door, "Hey man, can you let me in? I'm here to pick up my son." "I don't know," I said. "Maybe you should go around to the front entrance." "That's too far, man. Can you just open the door, please?" He sounded genuinely stressed. I hesitated, then pushed the door open. He thanked me and moved quickly through the locker room and into the school, apparently looking for his kid. I sat back down on the bench and went back to waiting for my mom. Then the alarm went off. Lockdown. And from somewhere in the school, screaming. I killed the lights. There was no door I could lock on the locker room, so I found a random locker and climbed inside, pulling it shut behind me. For a while, all I could hear was a distant screaming, then footsteps. Someone sprinting into the locker room. I pressed my eyes to the slits in the metal. Couldn't make them out, but from the sounds, I figured it was another student hiding. Then, a second set of footsteps. I knew immediately who it was. The man I'd let through the door came in fast. He still had his hood up, but now he was wearing a mask, and he was carrying a machete. The blade was dripping with blood. He ran down the row between the lockers, screaming and swinging, slashing random doors as he went. I must have flinched. My locker rattled just slightly. He stopped, turned his head, looked directly at the slits I was looking through. He walked up slowly and stared through the door. I held my breath and gripped the inside handle of everything I had. "I know you're in there," he screamed. "Come out so I can cut your fucking head off." "Stop. You got the wrong guy. You are dead." The machete punched through the locker door, inches from my face. I was staring straight at the blade as he struggled to yank it back out. I knew if I opened the door to prove I wasn't whoever he was after, he'd attack before he could think straight. There was no way out. Then we both heard sirens, still distant but closing fast. He knew he was out of time. He pulled the machete free and bolted straight back through the door, the one I'd let him through. I stayed frozen in the locker. A minute later, the student who'd been hiding in the other locker stumbled out, covered in blood, and ran towards the main school. I stayed put until the police came through and cleared the room. I told them everything. It didn't matter. Neither the masked man nor the injured student were ever identified. The investigation went nowhere. Years later, I still think about that door. If I'd left it shut, he'd have stayed outside. I know I was just trying to help someone, but knowing he's still out there unidentified, that doesn't sit well with me. It never has. This happened right after spring break. Nobody was happy about being back, least of all me. I'd apparently eaten my weight in junk food over the holiday and my stomach was making me pay for it. After lunch on the first day, I slipped out of class to use the downstairs bathroom. Less traffic, more privacy. When I got there, it was empty, which was ideal given what was about to happen. While I was in the stall cleaning myself up afterwards, I noticed writing on the door. Just one line in marker. "Do not come to school on March 23rd. That was 2 days away. It sat uneasily with me, given everything that had been happening in schools. I checked the other stalls to see if it was part of a broader pattern of graffiti. It wasn't. Just that one message. I didn't have time to dwell on it and had to get back to class, so I filed it away and tried not to think about it. The next day, my stomach had other ideas. I was back in the same bathroom, same floor, second period. I went to check the original stall first. The message had been cleaned off. Janitor must have caught it overnight. I moved to the big end stall, locked the door, and sat down. The lights went out. Total darkness. Instantly, and I heard it. Someone had come into the bathroom just before the lights cut, and now I could hear slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the tile. I went completely still. I had no idea if they knew I was in here. I listened as they went into a stall. Then, the pop of a marker cap. Writing sounds. Then the cap going back on. The stall opening and footsteps leaving. I waited until I was sure they were gone, finished up by phone flashlight and turned the lights back on. Then I checked every stall. Same location as the day before. New message. "I'm going to shoot up this school." I stood there for a moment. I didn't want to be the person who overreacted. I didn't want to ruin someone's life over a dumb joke. But the alternative, staying quiet and being wrong, wasn't something I could live with. I went straight to the front office and told them everything. They locked down the entire school. I spent the next few hours in the office questioning every decision I'd made. Cops everywhere, parents being notified, the whole thing. Eventually, they cleared the building and declared it safe. The person who wrote the message was never found. The following day, March 23rd, the date on the original message, I went to school anyways. There were officers stationed outside and nothing happened. I still don't know what to make of it, whether my stomach ache put me in that bathroom at exactly the right moment to discover something real, or whether some kid was writing threats for shock value and I derailed their week. What I do know is that someone came into that bathroom, turned off the lights, and wrote a message in the dark while I was sitting 3 feet away. That part I'm certain about, and it still gives me chills. I went to a small rural high school, graduating class of maybe 200 kids, the kind of place where you knew basically everyone by face and name. Quiet town, not much happened. Kids rode bikes after school and played sports. No real bullying to speak of, at least not the kind you see in movies. There was one kid in my grade though who never spoke. I'll call him Luke. He wasn't strange looking or anything. If you went out of your way to talk to him, he seemed perfectly decent. But he was completely silent otherwise. I shared one elective with him, a computer class with kids from all 4 grades. Luke and I were both juniors. Not long into the semester, the seniors in the class started picking on him, making jokes about how quiet he was whenever the teacher asked questions. The teacher never stepped in. As the weeks went on, it got worse. I watched a paper ball fly from the back row and hit Luke in the head. He turned around, and the look on his face was something I've never forgotten. Sadness, anger, and total defeat all at once. I felt bad. I didn't do anything about it. One afternoon, I passed him sitting on a curb near the school after the day ended. Nobody was around. We were in a rural area. Nothing was walking distance. I asked if he needed a ride home. His face genuinely lit up. On the 10-minute drive, I told him to just ignore the seniors, that they were deadbeats anyways. He said they weren't the only ones he was sick of. He implied he was being picked on across multiple classes. In those 10 minutes, I felt like I actually got to know him a little. He seemed like a decent kid. I dropped him off, noted how close we lived, and said goodbye. After that, we'd say hey to each other in class every day, and I still never stepped in when he got picked on. One day, Luke wasn't in class. Computer class was 4th period. It wasn't until 7th period when the announcement came over the loudspeaker. Lockdown. This is not a drill. Our teacher looked more nervous than anyone. She killed the lights and rushed us all to one corner. We sat there in the dark for maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, before the principal came back on and explained that someone in a mask with a black duffel bag had been spotted approaching the school. Security had locked everything down before they could get in. A few police cars arrived and the school day was cut short. It was a Friday, so I took some of my friends back to mine to hang out. I don't remember much that afternoon. What I remember is waking up in the middle of the night to a light tapping at my bedroom window. There was a figure on the other side of the glass. I was about to run for my dad when I took a closer look and called out asking who it was. Luke's voice came back. My heart dropped all over again. I went to the window and lifted it just a crack. I asked what he was doing and how he found me. Through the window. I tried to do something bad, he said. It clicked before he even finished. I said, was it you who caused the lockdown? Yeah. He asked if he could come inside and tell me what he'd been planning. I told him no. I couldn't let him in and I couldn't hear what he was going to say. I told him to go to the school and confess. When he wouldn't step back from the window, I said my dad's name loudly enough to be heard. That got him moving. I went straight to my parents' room. My mom was the one who called the police. When an officer came over, I had no choice but to give them Luke's name and explain that he'd just shown up at my window, admitting to nearly doing something horrible at the school. They sent officers to his house. He wasn't there. They sent officers to his house. He wasn't there. The next day, he either came home or was found, and he confessed. He was charged with making a terroristic threat. He did time. He's been out for a long time now. I thought about Luke a lot over the years. Part of me felt for him. Watching the loneliness and being picked on relentlessly does that to a person. He came to my window that night because I was the only one who had ever shown him any basic kindness. That's a heavy thing to sit with. But he brought a gun to school with a mask on, and I don't fully believe he only came there to scare people. I just hope wherever he is now, he eventually got the help he needed. This happened in 2016 when I was in 5th grade. If you remember that year, you probably remember the killer clown sightings. It was all over the news and social media. Most adults thought it was a dumb trend. For us kids, it was genuinely frightening. It was a normal day at my elementary school in a quiet suburban area. Around 1 p.m. we were in class working on an assignment. The room was pretty quiet when one of the girls suddenly said out loud, "There's a clown outside." Some of us stood up and looked towards the window. There was a clown standing just a few feet from the glass, facing directly into our classroom. Baggy, dirty red and yellow suit, white face paint, heavy black around the eyes, big painted grin. After a moment, he started waving. Slowly. Some kids laughed, others looked scared. Our teacher, Mrs. Riker, walked to the window, looked at him for a second and said through the glass, "Excuse me, classes are in session. You need to leave." The clown didn't react. Same smile, same slow wave. Mrs. Riker told us to sit down and picked up the classroom phone. She walked into the hallway with it and spoke quietly. When she came back, she went straight to the window and shut all the blinds. The man was still out there doing the same thing. Less than 2 minutes later, the principal's voice came over the loudspeaker, and there was something in the tone that told you immediately it wasn't routine. "Staff, please get your classrooms into lockdown formation." Mrs. Riker killed the lights and told us to get under our desks. She pulled the door shut and locked it. Some kids were giggling. I wasn't. We stayed like that for about 30 minutes before the all clear. Came. School security had confirmed the clown was gone. The principal didn't tell us anything else. Classes went on like normal. After school, I was walking home with my friend Chris. We lived in the same neighborhood a few blocks away. 2 5th grade girls behind us suddenly ran past us looking panicked. One of them said, "There's someone in the woods." We stopped and turned around. Behind the school, there's a small patch of trees, not deep woods, just enough to separate the building from the street behind it. Standing just at the edge, half hidden by the trees, was the clown. Same dirty outfit, same painted face. He was waving, not at random, slowly, deliberately, directly at the girls who had just passed us, like he was trying to call them over. Chris and I didn't say a word, we just ran. I told my parents the moment I got home. They called the school, and I heard later that police were called again and patrolled the area. They never found anyone. I don't know if he was just trying to scare kids or if he had something worse in mind. What I can't stop thinking about is that he came back after the lockdown. He waited, hid in the trees, and watched the children leave for the day. Nobody ever found out who he was. This happened not long ago. I live on the outskirts of Philadelphia with my son and stepdaughter. My best friend Joanne's daughter, who I took in legally after Joanne was murdered by her husband in 2016. He made national headlines and was convicted of 5 additional murders. He's serving 3 consecutive life sentences with no parole. I teach middle school at my son's school. He's a year below what I teach. My stepdaughter is a year above, so their classrooms are not far from mine. The incident took place on March 30th, 2020, just as the COVID lockdowns were beginning. Our school was fairly remote. The nearest school was about 10 miles away or so, and the nearest gas station 2 miles. The nearest park was 600 meters. We were one of the last schools to close. It was a normal Monday morning. I was teaching 6th grade math when the phone sent me a notification. Someone was at the front office trying to pick up my stepdaughter. The system alerts the emergency contact whenever a child is being collected. My stepdaughter had no appointments. She had no close family within any reasonable distance, and I was right there in the building. I replied immediately that I was on site and nobody was collecting her. Then they told me the person claiming to pick her up said he was her biological father. The school had no record of a biological father. Alarm bells everywhere. The line went quiet for a moment, and the woman told me she was going to call the principal. Something felt deeply wrong. I called my stepdaughter's classroom directly and asked for her to be sent to my room. She arrived within minutes. Not 10 minutes later, the lockdown siren went off. I had the kids push desks against the door and barricade the windows. Everyone sat in the corner. I had a strong feeling I knew exactly who this lockdown was about. We were in lockdown for 46 minutes. 2 hours after it was lifted, I was escorted out by police and questioned about my connection to the man, specifically about the CPS records linked to my stepdaughter. I explained the whole story. The police then told me how he had gotten out. A prison bus transporting inmates had been hit by a car and swerved deliberately into it. 10 prisoners were killed on impact. 2 guards were knocked unconscious and 20 escaped. Officers had already been sent to my home waiting for him to show up there. He never did. When the lockdown was called at the school, they knew immediately which of the escaped prisoners it was. He never made it inside. I don't let myself think too hard about what would have happened if they hadn't got there when they did. This happened my freshman year of high school. I'm 21 now and I still think about it. I went to a public school in a pretty average suburban town. We did lockdown drills every couple of months, so when the announcement came on, I assumed it was another one. It was a Wednesday, 4th period, Earth Science. We'd just finished a pop quiz. This is a lockdown. Lock all doors. Lights off. Stay quiet. Nobody panicked. Our teacher, Mrs. Chen, sighed, got up, locked the door, and turned off the lights, and told us all to go into the corner away from the door. People were whispering and laughing a little. Standard drill energy. Then the second announcement came through. Same voice, but different. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. The room went completely silent. Mrs. Chen didn't say anything. She just motioned for everyone to stay down and stay quiet. I could see her checking her phone. We could all hear faint police sirens somewhere outside. A few minutes passed, then we heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow ones, not hurried like a teacher or an officer. Just one person walking at an even pace. They stopped directly outside our classroom door. Nobody breathed. 3 soft knocks. Nobody moved, and then the doorknob turned. They tried to open it. Locked. But kept trying. Not frantically, just methodically, turning the handle back and forth as if checking. Then a male voice from the other side said, "This is just a drill. You can open the door now." Everyone looked at Mrs. Chen. She looked back at us all, put one finger to her lips and slowly shook her head. The knocking continued, louder now. The voice kept calling through the door. I was shaking. I knew everyone else was too, even the ones who wouldn't admit it. Eventually it stopped, footsteps moving away. 5 minutes of total silence, just the police sirens outside getting closer. Then just from somewhere down the hall, a girl screamed. Just once, then nothing. A few people in my class started crying quietly. Someone whispered they'd seen a shadow pass a small glass window on the door more than once. Every time anyone made a sound, Mrs. Chen silenced them immediately. And then finally, police officers' voices were down the hallway, telling everyone to stay in place, and they were going room to room. When they knocked on our door, they had to show their badges before Mrs. Chen would move. We were escorted out in line. Police cars everywhere outside, a SWAT van in the car park. As we came out of the office, an officer was leading a man in handcuffs from the building, looking about 30 years old, pale, long dark hair, dark clothes, definitely not a student. Later we found out he had slipped in through the side door during a delivery. That door was right at the end of the science wing, our wing. He was described as mentally unstable and had something in his backpack, though they never told us what. They said nobody was hurt and everything was under control. I'll never believe that. Not after that knock and not after that scream. I just started school when this happened. I'm 15, a sophomore at Northside High School in Jacksonville, North Carolina. That morning I came in early around 6:55 a.m. I was one of the first in my first period class, which was chorus. Our classroom is at the very end of the fine arts hallway, right next to the auditorium. I was sitting at my desk with headphones in, waiting for the bell, when I noticed my teacher saying something. I paused my music and looked up. My classmates were filing into the closet at the back of the choir room. We'd just done a lockdown drill the day before, so I wasn't sure at first if this was another one, but I followed everyone in. The teacher shut the door behind us and turned off the lights. We sat in complete darkness, just a thin strip of light under the door. I still didn't know what was happening. Then I heard police sirens outside. That's when I understood this was real. I kept myself calm. I figured if I stayed composed, I might not spiral. I sat quietly and listened for anything from outside. There was nothing. We stayed in that closet with the lights off for nearly 2 hours. When we were finally let out, I went back to my seat and put my headphones back in, trying to get back to normal. After a while, I asked my teacher what had happened. I said, "Were there any fights today?" She looked at me seriously and said, "It's much worse." I looked out the window. Cars lined up at the back of the school. Too many, and too still for regular pickup traffic. My friend Jacob told me someone had been stabbed in the middle of the school in the rotunda. A few minutes later, my mom texted me and asked if I was okay. Then she called. She told me she'd parked at the baseball field with a group of other parents trying to get their kids. Some of the girls in class had started crying. That made it feel completely real. Eventually, my name was called and I was allowed to leave. I found my mom at the field and she was shaken. So was I. She drove me to her workplace and we went into a quiet room together and both cried. Her coworkers came in and tried to comfort us, and I had to go outside on my own for a while to put my headphones back in. 3 days grace, just to get my head straight. Later, we found out what happened. 2 students had been taken to a hospital, but one of them died. A teacher had also been slashed by the attacker. 3 people hurt in total. A 16-year-old who had already been charged with voluntary manslaughter, assault with a deadly weapon, and a list of other serious charges. 2 more students were charged with assault and disorderly conduct. Someone had filmed the stabbing and posted it on Snapchat. I didn't watch it. My mom described it though. The person recording was running, phone pointed at the ground, but you could clearly hear the screaming of kids in the background. My mom thought it might have been gang-related. After I heard that, I was scared that someone might come back in retaliation. More violence. I didn't know the kid who died, and I never will, but I've been thinking about him ever since. I hope he rests in peace.